Hi, mums and dads, and welcome back to Lights, Camera, Baby. I'm your host, Projeni Pather, and today we're back to bringing you real expert advice, but in a way that you can really use it in your daily lives. And today we're diving into a topic that has exploded our channels, always an issue, always top of mind, and that is sleep. Now, when we talk about sleep, it's not just the routine and wake window conversation. We're talking sleep personalities and how your baby's sensory world influences everything from their naps to their night wakings. Now, joining me today is someone who works at the heart of childhood development and someone that we've known at Mama Magic for a very good long time, a few years. I'm not going to say how long, but she's been around for a while and she is an expert in this field. And it gives me great pleasure to welcome Una van Staden, who is the owner of Pikanini ECD. Una, welcome.
Good morning. Hi, everybody. Thank you very much for hosting me this morning, Projeni. As you've introduced myself, my name is Una. I'm the owner of Pikanini Early Childhood Development, and I'm very excited today to spend some time with you and share some sleep tips with parents, specifically regarding the baby's sleep personalities, as well as how their sensory world shapes their naps and their night wakings as well.
Well, we're so glad to have you unpack this with us today. It's going to be a lot to take in, so please do take notes. Feel free to. Just a reminder to all our parents that are listening today that today's conversation is for information and educational purposes only. It's not medical advice, and it's always helpful to remember to contact your healthcare provider for personalized support. Right. But so let's get on with it. Let's start with a term that's been used a lot that's specific to you, Una, and that's sleep personality.
Mhm.
Now, this blew my mind. I mean, sleep personality. I wish I knew about this earlier. For parents that are hearing this for the first time, what does that even mean?
Okay, so a baby's sleep personality are their sleep tendencies, their patterns, and their temperament. So basically, how much sleep does your specific baby need? How do
Right.
they sleep? And also how they respond to changes in their routine, in their soothing mechanisms,
Uh-huh.
and environmental factors. All right, so from a very, very young age, babies already show different sleep personalities, even in the first week of a baby's life. For this reason, as a sleep consultant, it's always important for me to try and determine what a baby's sleep personality is, because that's going to impact on how you are going to shape a sleep plan for a parent. Now, just to give you a few tips on what kind of personalities to look out for, we
Yeah.
have sensitive sleepers, and I think the word sensitive speaks for itself. Those
True.
are babies who are very sensitive to light and sound, and they need a lot of input to enable them to fall asleep. We have social butterflies. Those are one of my favorite babies to work with. They're a pleasure for playtime, but they're really difficult to try and get them to fall asleep. And the reason for this is they have fear of missing out. All right. So there's a FOMO factor with those babies who are social butterflies. We then have easy sleepers. So a lot of parents will say, my baby's an easy sleeper. I can take them to a restaurant. I can take them to granny's house. And irrespective of where they are, they fall asleep quite easily.
Yeah.
We then have our catnappers, which I think a lot of parents struggle with. The good news with catnappers is that they tend to consolidate their nighttime sleep pretty quickly. So I think parents in that stage just need to make peace with the fact that they have a catnapper. Although it is very important for us, we've got to remember that a full sleep cycle for a baby is a 45-minute cycle. So even if they are a catnapper, we've really got to try and get to at least the 45 minutes of that sleep cycle, just so that your baby can process the information. So what happens is if the baby, brain processing takes place at that 45-minute mark. So if the baby sleeps for less than 45 minutes, very often what happens is we lose those brain cells, so the connections aren't formed. So it is quite a lot of pressure on parents to try and enable their baby to sleep for at least one full sleep cycle during the day, which is a 45-minute cycle.
That's fascinating.
And then, of course, we have our active sleepers. I currently have a client who I've actually suggested, even though the baby is young at the 5-6 month mark, it might be best for her to move her baby into the baby's own room and use as a monitor and safe sleep practices to hear if the baby needs any form of assistance through the night, because their baby's a very active sleeper. So the baby grunts, she makes noises throughout the night, and the mom's assuming that the baby is not sleeping, but she is actually sleeping. She's just a noisy sleeper.
I know many noisy sleepers. They even grow up to be noisy sleepers, right? So if a parent wants to figure out what's their baby's sleep personality, like what are the top 3 things to look out for?
Yeah, I think it's important for parents to take note how easily does their baby settle.
Okay.
Does their baby respond well to light, to white noise, to sound, for example? Does the baby need a very dark room to enable them to fall asleep?
Right.
Look, ideally for the first 3 months, we're really not in favor of closing the curtains totally. And the reason for this is we want to try and avoid day-night reversal with newborn babies.
Okay.
So newborn babies very quickly fall into that pattern where they want to sleep throughout the day and then they wake and they keep their parents awake throughout the night. So it's important to not let them sleep for longer than 2.5 hours per day nap as newborns, so that we can regulate their nighttime routine as well as fit in all their day feeds.
Yes.
So the way, how they fall asleep is important. Also to see how your baby responds to certain disturbances. For example, again, are there external factors, for example, cutlery sounds in a kitchen if you let your baby cat nap or nap in the lounge area? How do they respond to that? Do they need total block out as they are older? Are they happy to sleep? Some children go to school during the day. The schools very often don't have total block out.
That's
so
true.
those babies actually learn to sleep in a bit of light as well. And then your baby's self-soothing techniques.
Right.
Does your baby need a lot of input if they wake up, throughout their sleep cycles? Do they need to be picked up again? Do they need to be rocked? Or do you have an easy sleeper where you could potentially just go in and from a sensory perspective, maybe just apply a little bit of pressure on your baby's body and they're happy to fall back asleep again? So those are the top 3 things that I would look at when we classify a baby's personality.
Okay. And I'm sure you find that at times, do they overlap? Could there be a little bit of this one, a little bit sensitive and a little bit of a butterfly?
They could be. I think it's just important for you to take note of what the main criteria is and which way do we lean more. And, and just responding. And sometimes their sleep personalities change. We often have babies who are very sensitive sleepers, for example, premature babies. Their central nervous system is not fully developed at birth because they haven't, they weren't born at full term.
Right.
So we very often find that premature babies have a very sensitive personality. And as time goes on, a lot of our premature babies could potentially be advised to have a bit of therapy, a bit of occupational therapy. And that helps their central nervous system regulate. And then as they grow older, 9-10 month mark, in fact, from the age of a year, I don't age correct a baby any longer, even if they were born 6 weeks or 8 weeks prem. So for the first year, we age correct on their sleep routine and patterns.
What do you mean by age correct?
Age correct means, for example, if your baby was born 6 weeks premature, you can't use their birth date to determine what their awake windows are. You need to age correct minus 6 weeks. Because their central nervous system isn't fully developed at that same mark.
Right.
And this is why it's quite, I work a lot with studios in Joburg where we host sleep talks, etc. And we have mommy groups. I'm very much in favor. The Babab Studio in 4 Ways is a great resource for our parents as well, to have parents come in and form a community and a group. And I always say to my parents, moms, please compare your shoes and your handbags, and please don't compare your babies. Because my baby might be 4 months old and so is your baby. But what I failed to tell you is that my baby was born 6 weeks prem. So now it makes me feel insecure as a mom, because how come this 4-month-old baby is able to do certain milestones and certain skills, but my baby isn't? But there's the age correction that needs to take place.
And mums as we are, the nature of us, I mean, we're constantly comparing our children.
100%.
And it can be so dangerous.
Yeah.
So I like that. Take a step back and let your baby grow at their pace, right? And there'll be times when you know when to be concerned.
100%.
But don't let it bug you on a daily basis.
I think that's really your pediatrician or your clinic sister's responsibility to take note of your baby's development and their skills, and for them to give you medical and professional advice about what skills your baby should be reaching at certain ages.
That is true. And that's why it's so important to always consult and always take baby for those regular checkups, right? So now, understanding personalities, it leads us to the next big question, like in terms of sensory development and how it shapes that sleep personality, right? And now you often say that sleep starts in the sensory system, and I find that so interesting, because we always talk about, I've always heard about the external environmental factors, but you're talking about it, taking it internally, understanding a baby's personality, that they're all not the same. So how do you break down that as simply as possible when we start to understand how the sensory system affects their sleep?
So I think when we chat about a baby's sensory system, it's always important to have a look and see how does your baby process sound, light, touch,
Hmm.
movement, and even tastes. All
Okay.
right. So
Wow.
this will affect how easily your baby falls asleep. Do they stay asleep? And how do they self settle or how do they soothe in the
Right.
evening? So these external stimuli can all play a major factor. For example, some babies really require external noise, for example, in the form of white noise to fall
Hmm.
asleep. But then it's also important to guide parents on how long your white noise should play for. So, for example, if we take two different babies and we play white noise for an hour, for example, for a day nap, as soon as the white noise switches off, some babies might wake up because there's no external white noise.
Oh,
Whereas
okay.
if you leave the white noise on for the duration of their nap, they might nap for longer because the white noise blocks out environmental noises. So that again would shape your baby's personality. How sensitive are they to external noises, a doorbell ringing, dogs barking,
Mm,
etc.?
mm. Oh my word. Yeah, wow. And it's these external factors that we start to place within their environment that affects who they are,
Mm-hmm.
and their internal system starts to respond to
Yeah.
it. And each one will respond differently, right?
Correct, correct. That's also a way in which we have a look at self soothing and movement. So you have some babies who require a lot of movement before they fall asleep, and this is, I think, the one of the sleep crutches that a lot of our parents naturally use is
Mm-hmm.
we assume we need to rock a baby to fall asleep. The concern for me is that our cots don't rock. So, if we're using a
Mm,
rocking motion, which is great from a sensory perspective to allow our baby to self regulate, and then we transition our baby onto a surface that doesn't rock,
mm.
if the baby should wake up within a mid sleep cycle, they're going to expect rocking to fall
Mm,
back asleep again,
exactly.
which means I need to pick up. So, they won't settle just with patting or pressure. So, what I generally guide parents to do is to offer a form of motion or movement before the day nap. So, we would
Okay.
call that our calming input. So, just even before you enter the room and close
Mm-hmm.
the curtains and get your baby ready for their nap, you know, those sleep
Yes.
anchors, those rituals of how to get your baby to fall asleep, I recommend offering a lot of movement input. So, I would either hammock a young baby or I
Right.
would pop them in a baby swing, even using a Pilates ball. I think we've got lots of parents
Yes.
who use a Pilates ball for a baby to fall asleep, which sounds natural. But again, remember, those are the sleep associations that you're going to have to use at 3 a.m. in the morning. So
Exactly.
let's rather use that outside of the sleep zone. So have a Pilates ball. Either sit with your baby. We're not going to bounce them until they fall asleep, but we're going to offer them that deep pressure motion, which settles their central nervous system, which allows them to fall asleep and stay asleep for longer.
So ultimately, you calming them down in that,
Correct.
right? When
Correct.
you calm that central nervous system, and you always need that calm. I mean, we
Mm-hmm.
all do, right? Even as
100%.
adults.
Yeah.
I mean, they talk about, that 2 hour
Mm.
window before bedtime,
Mm-hmm.
and how as adults
Yeah.
we, do things to calm ourselves down so that when
Correct.
we put our head on the pillow, we're able to fall asleep. So it's
100%.
so interesting how early that
Mm.
begins, that
Mm.
journey, and we
Yeah.
forget about it.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you also talk about that there's at different ages, there's
Mm.
different sensory
Mm-hmm.
needs, right? And how does that change quite dramatically in those first few
Yeah,
years?
look, I think first, as newborns, we need to try and create the womb-like environment for the first 3 months,
Hmm.
and that's why they call it the fourth trimester. So
Okay.
this is why you'll see that babies need to be swaddled.
Right.
That's providing them deep pressure. That's a form of
Yes.
sensory input. All right. So
Okay.
the startle reflex is as the babies transition through their sleep cycles,
Hmm.
they have that startle, and that's why a lot of young babies like to contact nap. Because if you contact nap or you put them in a wrap or carrier,
Yeah.
the pressure on the body stops the baby from startling.
Oh, I
All right, lots of
see.
gentle movements with young babies,
Hmm.
soft movements, soft voices. As they get a little bit older, your 3 to 6 months babies are become a lot more aware of their surroundings.
Mhm.
And it doesn't just affect sleep. You can even have a look at their feeding patterns in the 3 to 6 month age group. The babies become very distracted feeders. Whereas young babies, you could offer them the breast or the bottle and they'll very happily feed and nothing will disrupt them. Whereas if you breastfeed or you bottle feed a 4-month-old baby and dad or the nanny sneezes in the corner, the baby's going to startle, or they become more aware of those sounds. So it's also important to try and make sure that your environment in which you're feeding your baby and trying to put them down for their nap is in a quiet environment, because they're absorbing a lot of information. And then the 6 to 12-month babies, they are obviously exploring a lot more. They're on the floor, so they're able to explore. There's the crawling milestone that plays a big role. These babies now practice these skills as they're trying to fall asleep. So that's why it's so important to do so much floor play with your babies in their awake windows, so they can practice all those skills, crawling, pulling up, and exploring, so that they're not practicing those skills in the evenings. You can't stop them from doing it,
Right.
but if you offer a lot of floor time during the day, if your baby is struggling in the evenings because they're starting to roll, they're rolling from their back onto their tummy and then they're stuck on all fours,
Yes.
that also wakes them up. So practice a lot of that during their awake sessions.
Okay. Wow. So when a baby suddenly stops sleeping well at like 4 months or 8 months or 14 months, could sensory development be the reason?
Definitely. It could definitely be a key factor. Definitely at the 4-month age, what happens is your baby has rapid brain development at that age. And their sleep cycles are starting to mature. So lots of parents would call this a sleep regression. I call it a sleep progression. Progression means we're maturing, we're moving forward.
Yes.
But I think what's very important here, and this is where I feel it's so important at the 4-month mark, that we try and avoid unsustainable sleep habits to get our baby to fall asleep, because that then becomes a sleep association. And this is where parents feel like the wheels are falling off. Mummies often return to work at the 4-month mark, and we're assuming that my baby's not sleeping well because mom's not home. And it could be that there is separation anxiety. I totally agree with that. But it could also be that we have unsustainable sleep habits of rocking our baby to sleep, feeding our baby to sleep. And now it's not possible because we don't have so many hands-on in the home environment. The 8-month mark, there's a lot of motion again, the crawling, the pulling up, they, exploring a lot. So that makes it difficult to settle because they're trying to process new movements in that sleep phase. With our 14-month-old, this is where the babbling starts. Parents start counting how many words can my baby speak at this age. Babies start walking at this age. So that also impacts, because we have to ensure that we supply them a lot of sensory input in the late afternoons, in the form of motion, lots of hammock, lots of swinging, lots of bouncing, so that they can get rid of all of that energy, so that they don't practice those skills in the middle of the night. In winter, interestingly enough, in winter, a lot of babies struggle with sleep because there's very little outside play in winter.
That is so true.
So it's very much sedentary play indoors.
Yes.
And we don't get rid of that. So I've actually partnered with a company from Durbanville that I recently visited on one of my trips to Cape Town, where she actually has a swing that we can modify and use in the home environment. It doesn't necessarily have to be an outside swing. So I'm very much in favor of swinging and hammocking a baby.
Yes, I see that.
And that's very important for me. So even if it is raining or it is cold outside, pop the swing up indoors and make sure that your baby has that sensory motion to assist them to regulate. There has to be a transition from a play session to a sleep session.
Yes.
Where's that switch off during the day? In the evenings, it's easy because there's generally a warm bath that separates the day from the night. But during the day, it's difficult to do that switch off for babies.
I'm sure it must be, especially, they don't have that regulator that we do. They're not as aware as yet, and we're controlling that for them. Now, that brings us to something else in terms of when parents struggle to understand when there's sensory overload and then there's sensory underload, right? Like you're talking about the winter-summer scenario, where we're getting a lot more outdoor activity, and then in winter it's more indoor activity. But when does it become too much? Because there's so many changes in the year when it comes to whether it's be seasonal or whether it's be birthdays and holidays and festivities and families and and people in and out. And sometimes you can see when a child is getting too exhausted,
Yes.
mentally,
Yeah.
sensory
Yeah.
exhausted. And then there's times when it's the reverse. So
Correct.
how do we know which one is right or which one is
Yeah.
affecting them?
Yeah. So let's chat a little bit about sensory overload and sensory underload.
Mm-hmm.
So sensory overload is when a baby's had too much input.
Okay.
There might be too many bright lights for the baby, too much external noise, going to a birthday party, for example, or a family gathering, and I call it my parcel baby, that gets passed from one parent or one
Yes.
family member to the next. And I
Is
always
that
say
not
to
the
my parents,
rocking?
I say to my parents, if it's a once off, it's a birthday party, it's a once a week, once every 2 weeks. But if it's a continuous day, we've got lots of family members who like to pop in every day and visit baby. And that could slightly, be too much input for the babies. Also, too many toys out on the floor. We as parents,
Really?
I think, if you put a baby down, specifically if they're starting to learn how to sit between 5 to 7 months, most parents would tip out the toy barrel on the floor
Yeah.
in hope that my baby's going to stay stimulated.
Yeah.
And in fact, anything more than 3 to 4 toys, Projeni, is too many toys out on the floor for your baby. You're giving them
Really?
too much stimulation, too many colors, too many different shapes, and we have very unfocused play at that stage.
Okay.
So they become overstimulated from even just having too many toys on the floor. You'll see they become fussy, they become irritable, and I'm thinking, but why do you want to try and remove yourself from this environment when I've provided you with all the entertainment that I can? So we recommend no more than 3 to 4 toys out on the floor, so that if your baby does become a little bit overstimulated or bored with a specific activity, you can change, you can rotate the baby's toys for them.
Okay.
Sensory underload again is too little sensory input.
Okay.
So this we often find when parents appoint a new caregiver or new nanny, and worldwide healthcare professionals recommend it's the best to try and keep your child in the home environment for the first 2 years of life, so that their immune system can build up.
Yeah.
But it's also important for us to encourage our caregivers to be empowered on how to stimulate our babies age appropriately. We always want to make sure that when your baby does enter into the school environment, that they are already on par with everyone else who's been in the school environment for however many months prior to them. All right. So we need to make sure that and hold our nannies accountable for what activities are you doing with my baby in their awake session. And I believe it's a parent's responsibility to guide a nanny.
Yes.
All right. So there are courses that we run that we call it the Power of Play course, that you can show parents and nannies how to age appropriately stimulate those babies so that they're not under-engaged in their awake sessions.
Okay.
And both of those, sensory overload, it's going to be difficult for a baby to settle. It's almost like they're wired. Whereas your understimulated babies become frustrated and bored in that environment, and then they haven't had sufficient sensory stimulation to enable them to settle.
So let's go to the overload, right? Now, like you're saying, you give too many toys, there's just too many options to choose from. I mean, as adults, it's very much the same as we grow up, and we'll focus on different activities at different time, and multitasking is not always the greatest. But when we talk about that overload, before that sleep time comes, that period before sleep time, how long before sleep time should we start calming their nervous system?
So I would recommend my calming input is generally 15 minutes before a baby's nap is due.
Okay.
So we do work, and I think it is something that we will unpack a little bit later, but I don't like a clock-based routine for babies. I think it's important to watch awake windows for babies.
Okay.
Obviously, watching their sensory cues as well. Young babies would give you very easy cues that they're ready to sleep. They rub their eyes, and it's quite interesting why they rub their eyes. It's, there's a lot of tension build up in their eyeballs. And they actually try and use their little knuckles to rub out the tension in their eyeballs. So that's a very cute, good sign for me to say that my baby's ready to go down for their nap.
Okay.
So
then during that time, should we be removing all the toys?
I would remove our baby from the stimulation and then offer the calming input. So options would be, for example, telling your baby a story without pictures. So there's always this conception that we need to read to a baby to calm them.
Yes.
But think about reading a book to a baby where there's pictures. We're stimulating the baby before their nap.
That is true.
And while we're wanting them to fall asleep, their little brain is thinking about the bunny that they just saw in that book.
Yes.
So I like to tell a story. Tell them about the day they were born. Tell them about the day mom and dad got married. So that could be an option. Swinging or hammocking them is another good way of doing the calming, as we said, bouncing on the Pilates ball, or even just taking them for a quiet walk in the pram. So I quite like a rocky surface if you have. So if you've got a bit of uneven paving, that's even better for me, because it's that motion that helps your baby settle from a play session and transition into a sleep session.
And I suppose start initiating the process by packing away the toys could be a lead up.
It could be. It could be, depending on the age of the baby.
Yes,
you know,
of course.
and also just have a look at your setup in the home environment. I try, specifically if your baby's struggling to sleep during the day, I try and avoid having toys out that are visible to your baby when I want them to sleep.
Yes.
So what I might even recommend a caregiver or a parent do is take 3 or 4 toys. Remember, we're not taking everything.
Yep.
Take 3 or 4 toys and stimulate your baby in a different environment. So I like to create a play zone and a sleep zone. And it doesn't have to be a complete play zone, a playroom setup.
Right.
It could be anywhere in the home.
Yep.
And then when it comes to sleep time, at least there's not that visual cue which stimulates your baby. Okay. If we don't have an option, I recommend a parent take a flat sheet or a little fleecy blanket and just cover the toys when it comes to sleep time.
Got you. Brilliant. So once we understand the sensory load, the sleep environment obviously then becomes the next big thing, right? But before we get to that, one question that we have for you is, what is one sign parents miss that shows that their baby is overstimulated? What do you think that one sign?
So I think the one sign that I think parents need to look out for is a baby who has glazed eyes or who's unfocused.
Okay.
So you'll see that you'll try and engage with your baby and they are quiet, they're not crying, but they're not focusing on you. So they very often lose eye contact. It's something I recommend my parents to keep a quick look out for. Is they lose eye contact because they're actually trying to process the input that they've already received. Their brain is not ready to accept any new input. So unfocused eyes or glazed eyes is a good option for me to have a look at.
I mean, I've seen it, and now that you say it, it makes so much sense because it's something that we are aware of, and we lots of mums are very sensitive to it as well, and we immediately see that look and we know that look, but saying it out loud and putting a statement like that to it gives it a term now, the glazed eyes. That is so true. Now, so I can teach everybody else. I mean, mom can teach dad, can teach the nanny, can teach granny to look out for those glazed eyes and know that baby is overstimulated. Yeah. Love that. Okay. So let's move on to the sleep environment, right? Now, if you had to describe a sensory-friendly sleep space in a sentence, what would you say? I mean, I know we talked a little bit briefly about it, but let's reiterate that.
Okay. So ideally, it needs to be a predictable area, calming area, low sensory input in that area. So low visual input.
Okay.
So if there's a mobile over the cot, please remove the mobile over the cot.
Really?
Think about a baby. Let me finish the sentence and then I'll explain the mobile. All right. So your low visual input, comfortable light. Yeah. So depending on the age of the baby, sound, if white noise is recommended for your baby, and temperature plays a major, major role in your baby's sleep environment.
Okay, let's start that again. Let's say that again, that sentence for me.
So let's unpack low visual input, which means no toys, no mobiles in the cot. Firstly, toys are a safety hazard in the cot for your baby. So should your baby start rolling, the toys could fall on your baby, and that is a suffocation risk for me. Mobiles over the cot, should your baby have a short nap, less than a full sleep cycle of 45 minutes, and they look up and there's a mobile over their head, it's going to be extremely difficult for you to try and settle your baby back to sleep because they now assume that it's playtime. Okay. Comfortable light for me would be, remember the first 3 months we've recommended not making the room totally dark to avoid the day-night reversal. Yes. And yet from 3 months we try and increase a bit of melatonin in your baby, specifically during day naps. So that is why we would make the room as dark as possible. Yes. Also remember, in summer from 5 a.m. in the morning, the light shines through, and that sudden light in the early hours of the morning also hits your baby's optical nerve, which then can sense a very early morning wake up. So we try and recommend any waking before 6 a.m., 6:30 a.m. we would treat as a night waking. So please make sure that the rooms are dark enough so that sunlight is not impacting on your baby's sleep environment. And then temperature. All right. This is one of the things that make it more difficult for parents to try and navigate to see what is a good room temperature for our babies. A good room temperature for babies to sleep is between 18 to 22 degrees. Now, in my experience, if you recommend an 18-degree room temperature for a South African mom, the mom's going to say, there's absolutely no way my baby's going to freeze. Yet the Lullaby Trust in the UK recommend between 16 to 18 degrees for a baby's room temperature. I don't feel that South African bodies are accustomed to that cold weather. So 18 to 22 degrees is a good room temperature. And interestingly enough, we need to understand that babies, based on their gender, need a different room temperature.
Right, yes.
So boys have a higher body temperature than what girls do. So boys' room temperature, for me, a good room temperature is around 19 to 20 degrees. Girls, closer to 21 degrees. All right. And my parents, my moms, I'm not throwing you under the bus here because I'm a mom myself. My moms very, very often overdress our babies.
Yeah.
And then our babies perspire. And they need more hydration to take them through the night. So they might be thirsty at night wakings and not necessarily hungry.
Yes.
But in helping our parents through this, I'm very much in favor of using sleep sacks or sleep suits for babies.
Okay.
So we remove all blankets from the room and from the cot area. Blankets, firstly, aren't a safe sleep practice.
Yeah.
If babies move down in the cot, the blanket can move over the baby's head, which causes a risk of suffocation.
Okay.
Plus, toddlers kick their blankets off.
True.
So I like sleep suits, which looks like a sleep sack, except of having that round bell shape at the bottom, it's actually got legs. So it's almost like a onesie that they wear. And I use that up until the age of 6.
Wow.
Because toddlers kick their blankets off and then they want to come and climb into their parents' bed because there's body heat.
Yes.
All right. And then it's important for me, and this is something that our grannies and the older generation do struggle with, is it's not a good idea to feel a baby's hands or feet to feel whether they're hot or cold. It's not a good indication. Because babies drink often, the energy is concentrated to their tummy to digest their meals or their feeds, which means the extremities don't get a lot of blood supply. So cold hands are definitely not a sign that your baby's too cold. Okay. You should either be feeling their forehead or the back of their neck, and that's going to determine whether the baby is hot or cold.
That is very clever. That's fascinating because most parents do that. And grandparents. You're so right. I mean, and the aunts. Baby is too cold. No. Yeah, that is so right. I mean, they have their own way of regulating their bodies, but at the same time, it might not be the same as the way as our needs as adults are. They're so different. So that's the environment. I have lots to consider there, moms and dads. There's lots to consider. Things that we thought that were obvious. I mean, putting a blanket over your sleep mobile, the toys in the cot, those kind of things all need to be removed. As it's just mentioned, for those long sleep times, right? Now, especially the cot mobile gets me. Yes. Especially, as a mom, when you've done it, and when somebody explains it to you, and that's why we need people like you in this world to sometimes point out the simplest things that are just sitting under our noses, and it's so obvious, but we get so carried away as moms and dads trying to do the best that we can.
100%.
Right?
And a cot mobile is it's a good sensory cue for your baby, but use that when your baby is awake. For example, if mommy needs to take a shower or you need a 2-minute breather, pop your baby down into their cot, let them just observe and let them learn how to grasp and put some music on for them. But when it comes to sleep time, let's remove that mobile, please.
Yeah. Makes complete sense. Now we talked about the sleep environment. Now let's talk about routines, right? Why do routines actually matter? So you say that routine is more than a schedule. It's a sensory cue. But why is that so crucial?
Okay, so I think babies rely on predictable patterns to make them feel safe and calm. And for this reason, it's important to rather follow awake windows and follow your baby's personality more than following the time on the watch. All right. So we can't say that a baby needs to nap at 9 o'clock, 3 o'clock, and 5 o'clock, for example. Only once your baby is roughly between 15 to 18 months and they're ready to have the transition from 2 naps to a 1 nap schedule, do we really plot that nap at around 12 p.m. So that becomes more predictable. But with our younger babies, we need to offer them that nervous system safety. All right. And consistent cues is going to help their nervous system regulate. For example, the calming input before their day nap, dimming their lights, putting on their sleep sack, all of those are sensory cues. I'm also very much in favor, if we have a safe sleep practice with a breathing device, of introducing a sleep association for your baby. So a silky bunny, a taglet, what we would call a doo-doo for your baby. Your baby knows that's a big visual cue for your baby,
Yeah.
which helps their sensory system, knowing that every time my parent, my nanny, my granny brings that bunny to their shoulder, I know the intention of this adult is they want me to go to sleep. And then also they recognize their patterns before they recognize time. Babies can't tell the time on the clock. So they know that when this process takes place, this is my parent getting me ready for a nap routine.
Yeah, I like that. There's lots of gems in there. That is, it's so handy to understand that. And I mean, sometimes, but we're using those items at the wrong times and stimulating the wrong reactions. So what's one routine mistake parents make without realizing it, do you think?
So I don't necessarily think it's a mistake. I always say my parents, do the best that they can with the information that they have. So I think it's important for parents to have a look at how they're putting their baby to sleep and try avoid holding your baby until they're asleep. This is the main crutch of sleep training, is letting a baby fall asleep on an adult's body and then transitioning them into a different environment onto a different surface.
Yes.
And I often recommend, for example, if you had to fall asleep tonight in your own bed at 10 p.m., tomorrow morning at 4 a.m. you wake up and you're lying on your kitchen floor. Are you going to go back to sleep?
No.
Are you going to panic?
Absolutely.
Are you going to say, please take me back to the environment in which I fell asleep, because that was a safe environment for me? So really from around 8 weeks of age, so you can't spoil a newborn baby, but from around 8 weeks of age, I'm very much in favor of teaching drowsy but awake sleep patterns. That is assisting your baby with a gentle, responsive approach. So definitely not a cried out approach, gentle, responsive approach to allow your baby to fall asleep in the environment that we want them to stay asleep in.
Okay.
So that is something that I really would like to encourage our parents to try and work towards, what we call the drowsy but awake sleep approach for our babies.
Okay, wonderful. Now let's move on to how daytime sensory play affects nighttime sleep. I mean, I would never have thought that the two would be related, but is it true that a baby who plays better during the day sleeps better at night? I mean, old wives' tales will say, actually you're tiring out the baby, he's going to be overstimulated and not be able to rest well, too agitated. I mean, so those are the things we've all been taught, as moms.
Yes.
So to try and keep it consistent through the day. What are your thoughts on that?
Look, I think there's a fine line on overstimulation and understimulation when it comes to a baby. So I think for our overstimulated babies, we've got to make sure that we offer them the right kind of stimulation. And I would classify that into two different kinds of play that we have, which we haven't really unpacked today yet. One would be formal stimulation, mental stimulation. The other one is independent play.
Okay.
So formal stimulation would be that face-to-face interactive play with your baby, and you're teaching your baby a skill.
Right.
For example, our young babies, if we have a look at the different ages, under the age of 3 months, I would do a lot of visual tracking exercises with these babies. You can teach them their body parts. This is mommy's head, this is baby's head, this is mommy's nose, this is baby's nose.
Right.
You can do some tummy time movement with them, doing gentle movements with our younger babies. So those would be the kind of stimulation activities I would do with newborns. With your 3 to 6 month old babies, there's very good hand-eye coordination activities that you can bring in here. Lots of grasping activities, teaching a baby how to hold a rattle, how to shake a rattle. Doing tummy time with them, it's very important that tummy time at least half an hour a day, just to strengthen their shoulder and their upper body, so that when it does come to crawling purposes, that they are not frustrated and keep collapsing. And then with our older children, from 6 to 9 months is doing lots of pulling up activities, exploring activities, doing messy play with them, exposing them to different kinds of textures. So that would be your formal stimulation that we interact with our babies. But in each awake session, your baby needs to have double the amount of time of what we call independent play or free play. That is a baby who is semi-supervised,
Okay.
We've let them, younger babies, lie down underneath a play gym, for example. Again, ideally no more than 3 to 4 dangles hanging to avoid the overstimulation. Let them grasp, let them listen to music, do a lot of black and white activities for them. Even go outside, interchange your activities, go and pick some flowers, hang a flower on specific holidays, for example, hang some Christmas decorations for them, just to try and expose them to different kinds of visual cues as the younger babies. Your older little ones, 6 to 12 months, if they are seated in a sitting position, pop out some stacking rings. Let the baby learn how to manipulate and focus on how to reinsert the rings on the stacking ring.
On his own.
On their own. So the nanny or the parent is supervising, doing an adult duty.
Right.
And the child is entertaining themselves. And very often we find that we as caregivers feel we have to stimulate our baby throughout the entire awake session. And that is where we have the glazed, unfocused eyes. It's too much input for your baby.
Yes. And I think you when you give instructions to your helper, whoever that helper might be, whether it's granny or aunt or your nanny, you always want them to be physically engaging, but it does not necessarily mean that they have to be physically playing a game of sorts, but it could be more sitting by and watching
supervising play. Yeah. Otherwise, as the children get older, they find it very difficult to entertain themselves. So my parents struggle on weekends because you have household chores to do around the weekend if you're a working parent.
That's true.
And then your baby doesn't actually allow you the ability to just move out of the room to do something. Whereas if they're used to that independent play, what we call free play on a weekly basis, they'd be happy for you to set them up with a few toys and then remove yourself.
Okay. So you're saying balance those two types of play in the day for a calmer night's sleep.
100%.
So it's a more fulfilled child, having explored those different sensory plays and resulting in a calmer nervous system at night.
Correct.
Delightful. Now let's talk about, lastly, the sensory play for sleep regulation, right? Can sensory play actually help a baby wind down and prepare for sleep? I know we mentioned this earlier as well, right? The kind of sensory play that we need to lead up to. But let's reiterate that here. Okay. I mean, there's different times in the day, right? So let's go through that.
So in the mornings, I like to do a lot of energizing sensory play with the baby. So do lots of movement, do bright colors, do lots of sound.
Right.
This awakens their nervous system.
Okay.
It separates. Through the night, we calm. In the morning, we're ready to engage. We're ready to play. In the afternoon, it's very much a balanced sensory system for your baby. So lots of movement input in the afternoon, lots of exploring, lots of textures, so that can start leading us towards the wind down. I often do a walk in the late afternoon as well, which is not part of the evening routine, but it's just ending off the day for our little ones. Nice. And then obviously in your evening routine, it is important for me that we do a lot of calming activities, low maintenance activities with our babies, bringing in a gentle massage, doing some deep pressure movement with your baby, slow rocking. A warm bath for me is almost non-negotiable. All right, I do believe that babies should have a bath on a daily basis. It's not about them, needing to be cleansed. It's more about the warm water in the bath that releases melatonin. And playtime in the bath is absolutely fine. Having, again, no more than 3 to 4 toys so that they're able to float. It's a tracking exercise for your baby while they're in the bath. But it's so important for me that once your baby comes out of the bath, that we then tone down. So ideally not to bath your babies too early in the evening. Bath needs to be the last activity for the night so that they're not being stimulated again by being brought into the home environment with bright lights in the kitchen, for example. Screen time's on, and then it's very difficult for babies to switch off from a sensory system to fall back asleep.
You're right. I mean, that ending that day with that bath time, again, calming that nervous system after an energized day, going through the highs and lows, is perfect to get baby ready for nap time or
sleep time in the evening.
In the evening. Well, thank you, Una. Thank you so much for this conversation. It's really, really been delightful. Now, from all our moms who want to speak to you, continue the conversation with you, please let them know where they can get hold of you.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Yes, so I have a Facebook page, Pikanini Baby Academy on Facebook. My Instagram is a very active Instagram page as well. It's Pikanini Baby on Instagram, and my contact details are also on our social media pages, as well as my website, which is www.pikanini.co.za.
Now, a little bit about Pikanini. You don't just focus on sleep, right?
Correct. Yes.
So tell us a little bit more there.
Yeah. So
quickly.
my main core role in my business is sleep and routine consultations. Again, without the cried out approach. So that's why I don't introduce myself as a sleep trainer. I'm a sleep consultant or a sleep coach, because we guide and empower parents on how to enable their children to sleep better. We have also designed a nanny course that I've been hosting for the last 10 years in Johannesburg, specifically guiding your nannies on safety in the home. You know, many nannies don't know how to use a fire extinguisher, for example.
Exactly.
So if there's a fire breakout in the home, does your nanny know how to use that fire extinguisher? We work on sleep and routine with the nannies. You know, what are the reasons that babies cry? And I'm just going to throw this in that just about everybody answers, what is the main reason that babies cry? And everyone says it's hunger. And hunger is my number 5. It's never my number 1. I don't mind what number 1 to 4 is, but it's not hunger, because we should be feeding babies on schedules.
Absolutely.
All right. And then I also offer the Power of Play, which is a stimulation course. It's a once-off course empowering parents and nannies on how to age appropriately stimulate their babies in their awake windows.
Well, that sounds delightful. I think all our mums are going to be ecstatic about that. But for those of you who can't get to Una at her center here, she is available to be contacted online as well, which is delightful. And we're going to have her back here, because I think many of you would want to know some quick tips and bits of information on how to help our nannies and our helpers to stimulate baby in the right way and to play with them in the right way as well. And just general play for babies, like you're saying, how important that is as well. So we'll be bringing Una back here in the studio for a lot more. But for those of you who'd like to contact her directly, please, you can get onto her social media handles and her website, where all the information will be, and we'll drop that into our show notes as well for you to have a look at. Thank you so much, Una.
Thank you very much, Projeni.
Well, remember, this episode is for information only, moms and dads, so please consult your healthcare provider for advice specific to your little one. Thank you so much for joining us today on Lights, Camera, Baby. Thank you for listening, for subscribing and sharing. Please share this information with a friend who might need it too, who has a baby that needs to find the perfect sleep routines. And until next time, enjoy your parenting.